Hi there, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. You're about to hear a story that doesn't start with love, or loss, or even a fight. It starts with pasta. That's right, fettuccine alfredo. Her favorite. I grated the Parmesan by hand. I even used that ridiculous pasta press she bought from an Instagram ad. Spent an hour getting flour out of my beard. All for a dinner I thought might fix something, though I didn't yet know what was broken. The table was set. Candles flickering. Her parents, her sister, her brother-in-law, all chatting over glasses of cheap Chardonnay. And me? I was just happy she was smiling. Until she wasn't. She dropped her fork mid-sentence, clinked it right onto the plate, then said it like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed in the mirror for weeks. I'm just staying married for stability. No hesitation. No shame. Just facts. Like telling someone you're out of milk. And just like that, the air went out of the room. I looked around the table. Everyone else froze, eyes darting like they were trying to calculate whether they were supposed to laugh or offer condolences. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't shocked. I was tired. So I stood up. Not quickly, not loudly, just enough to be heard over the rattling of my own heart. Well, stability ends tonight. And no one said a word. Not her sister. Not her parents. Not even her. Until I turned to leave, and she finally spoke up, half laughing. Lyle, don't make this bigger than it is. That's the thing. It wasn't big. It was quiet. Cold. Clinical. A confession disguised as a compliment. And it wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, not during the dinner, but after I walked out and checked my phone. There was a voicemail. Blocked number. Just breathing for 3 seconds, then a whisper. Check her calendar. Thursday nights. I hadn't even left the driveway yet. And I walked out. Now let me tell you what happened after I checked that voicemail. When I played it, I expected a scammer or maybe a butt dial. But instead, it was something way worse. 3 seconds of heavy breathing, and then a voice, calm, low, almost robotic, whispering. Check her calendar. Thursday nights. I replayed it about 12 times in the car, parked at the edge of our neighborhood, hands shaking like I'd just been pulled out of icy water. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stuck in that weird mental space between disbelief and blind acceptance. Like part of me had always known, but needed someone else to spell it out. When I finally pulled myself together, I drove around for a few hours. I didn't even realize I'd ended up in the parking lot of the Dollar Mart where Danica used to work before her corporate upgrade. That place used to be our inside joke, back when we were broke newlyweds buying ramen and clearance shampoo. I sat in the car with my head against the steering wheel, remembering her laugh. The real laugh. Not the cold, dismissive one she gave me at dinner. Around midnight, I went home. She was in bed, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway and asked, "Who called me tonight?" She looked up like I'd asked if we had milk. "What? I didn't call you." I didn't push it. Not yet. Instead, I told her I was sleeping in the guest room. She didn't argue, just gave me a slight shrug and went back to Instagram. But I didn't sleep. Not a second. I waited until I heard her snore, that soft little exhale she does when she's actually out. And then, I opened her laptop. I didn't want to do it. I hate snooping. I always believed trust meant you don't look, even when you could. But that voice in the voicemail, it didn't leave me a choice. Her calendar app wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. Danica was always cocky about her digital life. She thought I was too technologically slow to ever find anything even if I tried. There it was. Every Thursday night, 6:45 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., blocked out with a recurring event. Therapy, solo. I sat back, confused. She hadn't mentioned therapy in months. Last I heard, she wasn't the type. I clicked into the calendar event and read the location field. It wasn't a therapist's office. It was a restaurant. A nice one, too. Downtown. The kind we couldn't afford when she was working retail. The kind I used to point at from the car and say, one day. But she was already going. Alone, supposedly. Every week. Same time, same place. I clicked back a few months. Same entry. Every single Thursday. But the most damning part? One Thursday, 3 weeks ago, she had accidentally added a name to the invite. Probably thought she removed it. Declan M. My blood ran cold. Declan was a name I hadn't heard in a long time. He was her marketing mentor back in grad school. Bald, charming, slightly British, and divorced. Danica once mentioned he'd hit on her playfully at a conference. But she laughed it off. Said he was harmless. Yeah, apparently harmless, has dinner every Thursday. I sat on that information all night. Watched the clock tick past 2, then 3, then 5 a.m. At 6:30, I started making pancakes for the kids. Danica came down in a robe, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had shifted, like the world hadn't tilted off its axis. And I smiled, because now I had a plan. That morning, I flipped pancakes for the kids with hands so steady it scared me. Not because I wasn't angry. I was furious. But because the rage had crystallized into something cleaner. Something sharper. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to watch, listen, and collect every piece of evidence before I made a move. Danica walked into the kitchen like nothing happened. She kissed the top of my head and poured herself coffee with that fake little hum she does when she's pretending everything is fine. I played along. I asked about her day, reminded her we needed to take the car in for a tire rotation, made a joke about Jonah's science project. She smiled, laughed, nodded. You would have thought we were the happiest couple in South Dakota. But I saw it now. The gaps. The way her eyes flicked toward her phone every few minutes. The way she avoided long eye contact. The subtle tension in her shoulders when I moved too close. She was hiding something. And the worst part? She thought I was too weak to figure it out. So I did the one thing she never expected me to do. I called in sick. Danica left for work at 8:15 like always. She wore a cream blazer, which I knew meant she had a presentation. She liked to dress like promotion material. I waited 5 minutes after her car pulled out of the driveway. Then I opened our laptop and started digging deeper. I didn't just look at her calendar this time. I checked her synced photo cloud, her rideshare history, and yes, even her password manager. Most of it was locked. She'd recently changed some of her login credentials. But her Uber account was still signed in on the family tablet. That was her mistake. Every Thursday night, rides to the same restaurant. And every Thursday night, a return ride, not home, but to a different address across town. An apartment complex. Always the same building. I searched the address and cross-referenced it with Facebook. Guess who lived there? Declan M. The blood rushed to my ears. I felt physically sick. I think I sat there for 20 straight minutes, just staring at the screen. Not because I was surprised, I wasn't anymore, but because the reality of it hit me in a new way. She wasn't just meeting him for drinks. She was going to his place. Every single week. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the tablet. But instead, I just whispered, why? Like it would make a difference. Like I'd suddenly hear some explanation that made the betrayal logical. But that's the thing about betrayal. It's never logical. It's not a mistake. It's a decision. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. So I did something that felt disgusting. Even though I told myself it was necessary. I called Declan. I used a work phone, so he wouldn't recognize the number. I disguised my voice, slightly nasal, trying to sound like a delivery guy. Hi, this is Greg with Signature Wine. Just wanted to confirm your reservation with Ms. Danica this Thursday for 7 p.m. Under private tasting. There was a pause on the other end. And then Declan chuckled, like a smug little scoff. She must have used that excuse again. Tell her I'll have the red ready. He hung up. Just like that. That was it. Again. Like this was normal. Routine. A script they'd both memorized. I sat in the dark for a long time that day. The blinds were half open, and I just watched the shadows shift across the living room like time didn't belong to me anymore. I thought about the first time I told Danica I loved her. How terrified I was. How she smiled and didn't say it back until 3 weeks later, and I still waited. I thought about the apartment we couldn't afford but moved into anyway, the crappy car she used to drive, the nights we split frozen dinners and dreamed about someday. Now I realized someday came and went, and I was the only one still dreaming. That night, she came home humming. I was sitting on the couch, laptop closed, news on TV with the volume down. She sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. I felt her weight, and I hated how much I still wanted to believe it meant something. Rough day? She asked. No, I said. I actually learned a lot. She kissed my cheek. I didn't flinch. You're so quiet lately, she said. I forced a smile. Just processing a few things. She didn't ask what. That was her second mistake. The day after I spoke to Declan, or rather, the day after he unknowingly confirmed everything, I decided I wasn't just going to confront Danica. That would have given her the spotlight. And I wasn't interested in giving her another performance. No, I wanted the truth. Unfiltered. Unrehearsed. So I made a plan that would force her to reveal it. not just to me, but to everyone who thought they knew her. And yes, before you say it, I know revenge isn't healthy. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about liberation. About finally letting the truth echo louder than the silence I'd lived in for years. The next few days, I played the part. I kissed her goodbye in the morning. I packed lunch for the kids. I let her tell me she was staying late on Thursday for back-to-back meetings. I even helped her pick out an outfit. She chose a burgundy dress. I told her it looked powerful. And all the while, I was building the perfect mirror to hold up to her face. I bought a cheap burner phone with cash, downloaded a private GPS tracking app, slid the phone beneath the passenger seat of her car late Tuesday night when she was asleep. Then I logged into the tracking site from my laptop and waited. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. But I didn't just wait. I reached out to someone else, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Leah, Danica's ex, best friend. They'd had a falling out 5 years ago. I never got the full story, only bits and pieces. Something about Danica stealing a client or maybe sleeping with Leah's boyfriend at the time. I never wanted to believe that, but let's just say hindsight's got 20/20 vision and a megaphone now. Leah picked up after 2 rings. Lyle? Wow. Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. I need your help, I said, and I think you might want to hear why. I told her everything. Not with bitterness, not with anger, just clarity. When I got to the part about Declan and the Thursday nights, she let out a bitter laugh. Declan? She's still pulling that crap with him? Still. That word hit hard. Leah agreed to help. She had a friend who worked at the restaurant Danica kept going to, a bartender who had served them several times. I asked her to see if she could get any kind of confirmation, dates, photos, anything. She promised to reach out discreetly. Meanwhile, I kept monitoring the burner phone's GPS. Thursday finally arrived. Danica left the house at 6:38 p.m., wearing that burgundy dress and perfume I hadn't smelled in months. I watched her pull out of the driveway with a smile on her face, not the kind she gave the kids, but that tight-lipped, nervous grin she used to give me before our early dates. By 6:59, the GPS pinged at the restaurant. By 8:13, it moved to the same apartment complex as always. Same building, same side entrance. While she was doing whatever she needed to do to maintain her stability, I was printing screenshots, timestamps, even receipts from her Uber history that I'd quietly downloaded. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for closure. That night, Leah sent me a photo. Danica, sitting across from Declan at the bar, laughing, his hand on her knee. Her phone flipped upside down on the counter. Her wedding ring in her purse. Apparently, according to the bartender, she always took it off before she arrived. The bartender, by the way, told Leah this was a regular thing. Said they even joked about being undercover lovers during one of their wine tastings. I didn't cry when I saw the photo. I thought I would. Instead, I just stared at it, then saved it into a folder on my laptop labeled Stability. Danica came home at 9:46. I was sitting on the porch with a mug of tea, pretending to be scrolling my phone. She kissed me on the forehead, like always. Said the meetings went long. I asked if she was hungry. She said she grabbed sushi. And then, for the first time, I lied to her face with full confidence. Glad you're taking care of yourself. I've got something special planned for us this weekend. She raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, I said, smiling. You've earned it. She had no idea what I meant. After I confirmed the affair with GPS logs, photo evidence from the bartender, and the cold, unshakable truth that Danica had been lying to me for over a year, I decided it was time to stop being the quiet observer. No more pacing hallways at night. No more polite conversations over fake dinners. I was done being her safe option. I was about to become the last thing she ever expected, a man with nothing to lose and everything to reveal. That weekend, I told her I'd planned a short getaway for just the two of us. Something to help us reconnect. She looked suspicious at first, like maybe I was trying to make up for something I had done wrong. It was funny, really, how quickly cheaters become paranoid. But eventually, she smiled and leaned into the idea. Told me she could use a change of scenery. I rented a cabin, not the romantic kind. This place was isolated, raw, and stripped down. Just 2 rooms, a fireplace, and cell reception barely strong enough to Google the weather. But it had one very important feature, a flat screen with HDMI access. That would come in handy. The drive up was quiet. I let her do most of the talking. She complained about her boss, gushed about a new client at work, and even asked if I'd be willing to try couples therapy just to get things back on track. I almost laughed out loud. Therapy. The irony would have knocked me over if I hadn't been so laser-focused on what came next. We arrived just before sunset. I made dinner. Cheap spaghetti and garlic bread. Nothing fancy. She poured 2 glasses of wine and asked if we could talk honestly. I said yes. She said she felt like we'd been growing apart. I agreed. She said she felt like I hadn't been fully present lately. That's when I stood up, walked to my bag, and pulled out the remote to the TV. You're right, I said. I haven't been present. But I've been watching. Her smile froze. Watching what? I clicked play. The screen lit up with the image Leah's bartender friend had sent, Danica and Declan at the bar, laughing like they were in a rom-com. The camera panned wide, showing Declan's hand comfortably resting on her thigh. She stared at the screen, unmoving. Her wine glass didn't even make it to her lips. For the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback ready. I let the silence drag. Let her feel it. Then I said, "You always talk about stability like it's some burden you've carried for my sake. But here's the truth. Stability didn't protect you from being a liar. It just gave you a mask." She finally blinked, then started talking, fast. Defensive. Lyle, listen. This was never supposed to go anywhere. It's complicated. No, I cut her off. You're going to listen now? I pulled out the folder I'd printed, all the screenshots, all the Uber receipts, the restaurant reservations. I spread them out across the old wood table like crime scene photos. Every lie, every Thursday, every mile she drove to Stability's real address. She stood up, paced, tried crying, tried accusing me of invading her privacy, tried blaming me for emotionally checking out years ago. She even brought up my mother, like somehow, me not defending myself from her passive-aggressive comments justified what she did. None of it landed. None of it mattered anymore. After 2 hours of circling, spinning, and collapsing under the weight of her own deceit, Danica finally said something real. "I didn't think you'd ever leave. I thought you needed me too much." There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. Just the unfiltered truth behind her smirk. The smug certainty that I'd always be the guy who just takes it, who flinches but never fights back. I looked her in the eyes. "You were right about one thing," I said. "I did need you, but not anymore." I pulled out the envelope I'd hidden in my jacket. Inside were the separation papers, and signed, for now, along with a list of everything I'd learned, backed by timestamps and documents. She didn't even touch it, just stared at it like it was something radioactive. "So what now?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Now," I said, "now we go home. And you start wondering when the next shoe drops. Because this wasn't revenge, Danica. This was just the preface." We drove in near silence. I didn't play music. I didn't ask how she slept. I didn't offer to stop for coffee. Danica sat beside me with her arms crossed, her eyes staring out the window, pretending she wasn't unraveling. But I could feel it. Every mile closer to home was a mile closer to reality, one she could no longer control with clever excuses or emotional manipulation. She didn't speak until we pulled into the driveway. "Are you really going to end everything over one mistake?" That was her angle now, minimizing, reframing, making betrayal sound like a math error on a tax return. I didn't even reply. I just walked inside and left her standing by the car. Let her feel what it's like to talk into a void for once. That evening, I sent a message to someone I'd been holding back on. Someone who'd become an unexpected piece of this unraveling puzzle. Mark, Declan's ex-wife. You see, while I was digging into Declan, I found out he was once married. Twice, in fact. But the second wife, Mark's ex, had left him suddenly and deleted all her socials. Mark was the first. Still local. Still bitter. According to a forum post I found buried deep in a divorce support thread. I sent him a private message with a single line. "Your ex-wife wasn't the only one he tried to build a second life with." Mark responded within an hour. He didn't ask who I was. He just said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I laid it all out. Danica's weekly visits, the fake therapy sessions, the photos, the voicemail. Every detail. And in return, Mark told me something that made my stomach twist into knots. Declan had done this before, several times. Danica wasn't his only Thursday night guest. She was just one of 3. Let me say that again. 3. He rotated them. Different nights. Different fake names in his phone. One of them even thought she was in a committed relationship with him. had been for 2 years. Danica was Tuesday and Thursday. One woman was Sunday. The third, Fridays. Suddenly, this wasn't just about infidelity. This was about humiliation. About being dragged into a long con where my wife wasn't even the main character. She was just a subplot in some sleazy middle-aged Casanova's fantasy. And I was done being quiet. I printed the full timeline and included Mark's receipts, screenshots of Declan's texts to other women, some of them time-stamped within hours of Danica's supposed work meetings. I made a copy of the folder, backed everything up on a flash drive, and then I did the one thing Danica never expected me to do. I sent it to her boss, not out of spite, not even to get her fired, but because she had used her job and her title as the very tool to enable her lies. She'd scheduled business dinners that never happened, claimed mileage reimbursements for client consultations that were actually her wine-fueled trysts. And I knew, with painful certainty, that her company had a strict conduct clause. They'd even hosted a seminar on it last year, which I remembered because she rolled her eyes the whole time she told me about it. Less than 24 hours after I sent the file, Danica's office called. Not her cell phone, the landline, the one she never gave out anymore. I picked up and handed it to her without a word. She looked confused. Then, as she listened, her face lost all its color. I watched her legs go weak, her knees buckling as she sat down hard on the edge of the couch. She hung up and just sat there for 5 full minutes. "They're launching a review," she whispered. "They said I'm being placed on leave." I didn't blink. I didn't smirk. I didn't say anything. She stared at me, her voice trembling. "You did this. You've been planning this." And for the first time in over a decade, I felt no guilt. "No, Danica," I said. "You did this. I just stopped cleaning up after you." She stormed upstairs, slammed the bedroom door, and didn't come out for hours. I let her sulk, let her scream into her pillow if she needed to, because there was no speech left to give, no apology I wanted. She'd buried us under years of quiet deceit, and now she was choking on the dust. Later that night, as I stood outside on the porch staring at the stars, those cold, quiet witnesses, I realized something strange. I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't feel angry. I felt something simpler, calmer, freedom, and it was just the beginning. After the call from her company and her dramatic exit upstairs, I expected silence. Cold shoulders, maybe some indirect guilt tripping. But Danica surprised me the next morning. She came downstairs like nothing had happened. She was dressed in a casual cardigan and jeans, her hair tied up like it always was on lazy weekends. She made coffee. She even asked me if I wanted breakfast. It was eerie. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring creamer into her cup, "about everything. About us." I didn't respond, just watched her. Observed the way her hand trembled just slightly when she lifted the mug to her lips. "I know what I did was wrong," she continued. "But you didn't exactly make things easy. You've been emotionally absent for years, Lyle." Oh, there it was. The pivot. Not quite an apology, more of a subtle suggestion that her betrayal was somehow my fault. I expected it. I let her talk. She gave a long monologue about how we stopped communicating, how I had retreated into my routine, how she felt unseen. The usual script. The therapist-approved buzzwords. I waited until she finally looked at me for validation. "So, you cheated on me for over a year because I don't talk enough over dinner?" I asked. She blinked. "That's not what I said. But it's what you meant." And I could see it, the frustration in her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, but anger that I wasn't playing along, that I wasn't folding the way I always used to. She tried a new angle. "We can fix this. We've been through worse. You remember the apartment fire? How we stuck together through that. You're just in shock." She reached across the table, placed her hand on mine. I didn't pull away, not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. "Let's take a break," she said. "Not a divorce. Just space. Clarity. I'll move in with my sister for a while. We'll both think. Then we can talk about next steps." It almost sounded reasonable, measured, except I knew her sister wouldn't be where she ended up. She wanted to disappear just long enough to manipulate the narrative, maybe cry to her parents, claim she was emotionally abused, or that she was pushed away into someone else's arms. I knew this game, and I wasn't playing it. "No," I said. "There won't be a break." She narrowed her eyes. "Then what, Lyle? You want to ruin me? Humiliate me forever?" "No," I said. "I want peace. But peace doesn't start with pretending you didn't detonate a bomb in the middle of our life. And then I told her what I'd already set in motion. I had contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, one who specialized in infidelity-based separation cases. He'd advised me to gather everything. Not just emotional proof, but financials. And I had. I knew about the mileage reimbursements she filed under false pretenses. I knew about the business dinners charged to her company card. I knew she'd taken 2 personal days and labeled them sick leave while she spent nights at Declan's apartment. Danica's face fell. You can't use that. That's illegal. That's private. It's not illegal if you're married and we share accounts. Which, by the way, is still true, at least for a little while longer. She stood up suddenly, pacing now. You're destroying everything. You're weaponizing this like some kind of calculated revenge. I'm protecting what's left of my life, I said. Something you clearly stopped doing a long time ago. She left that morning. Claimed she needed air. I knew she was going to Declan. Maybe for comfort, maybe for advice, maybe just to feel like she still had someone in her corner. I didn't care. Because I wasn't sitting in corners anymore. I was preparing for war. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer in person. Brought him the folder. Showed him everything. He was stunned by how organized it was. Said most guys in my position came in sobbing, confused, reactive. I was calm. Calculated. Like I'd been rehearsing this my whole life. Maybe I had. He told me I had a strong case. Not just for divorce, but for protecting assets, limiting alimony, and even reporting misconduct to Danica's employer formally, if they hadn't already acted. That evening, I returned home to find Danica in the living room, holding her wedding ring in her palm like it was a museum relic. This doesn't feel real, she whispered. It hasn't felt real for a long time, I said. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, the kind she used to reserve for funerals or family emergencies. Do you still love me? And for the first time in years, I didn't lie. I did. But I don't even know who you are anymore. She slept on the couch that night. The next morning, she was gone. Her ring was still on the table. After Danica left that morning, I stood in the quiet house and waited to feel something. Rage, sadness, relief. But what I felt instead was stillness. Not emptiness. Not numbness. Just a clean, wide stillness. Like walking into a room that's finally been cleared out after years of clutter. I didn't know what came next, but for once, I wasn't afraid of not knowing. The divorce process began swiftly. My lawyer was efficient, professional, and thorough. Danica initially tried to fight, threatened to paint me as controlling or neglectful, but the documents I'd provided shut that down quickly. When she realized the truth was airtight and I wasn't playing games anymore, she backed off. She moved into her sister's officially, though rumors quickly started to spread. A few colleagues of hers reached out to me privately, not to gossip, but to apologize. One of them, a woman named Tara, said, "She used to say you were boring, Lyle. But boring doesn't sound so bad anymore." That hit me. Not because it hurt. It didn't. But because it reminded me of who I used to be. The boring guy. The predictable one. The safe bet. The background character in my own story. I'd spent so long shrinking myself to keep someone else comfortable, I forgot what it meant to take up space. Well, not anymore. I sold our house. Not out of spite, but because I wanted a fresh start. I moved into a modest place on the edge of town. Not big, but filled with sunlight and peace. I kept the old coffee maker, the bookshelf she never dusted, and the plant I once thought was dying, but somehow kept growing through everything. I started hiking again, something I used to love but gave up years ago because she thought it was pointless. I even joined a local book club, made a few new friends, and reconnected with my brother who I hadn't really talked to in ages. The silence in my life had turned into space to think, breathe, heal. And as for Danica, well, last I heard, she moved in with someone new. Not Declan, surprisingly. That ended soon after everything came to light. Turns out, she wasn't his only Thursday night fantasy. He had others. And she learned the hard way that being someone's escape doesn't mean you're their destination. I don't wish her misery. I don't even hate her. I think, in the end, she gave me something she never meant to: freedom. A clean break from the version of me that was built entirely around someone else's approval. So yeah, she said she stayed with me for stability. But I left her for clarity. And I've never felt more alive. Thank you all for sticking through this wild, emotional story. If anything like this has ever happened to you, a quiet betrayal, A shocking confession? Or maybe even a personal turning point you never saw coming? Tell us about it in the comments. What moment in your life made you finally say, "That's enough"? We'd love to hear your story, right here on Reddit Confessions. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that even after the biggest storm, calm does come. See you in the next story.